rank with distinction from the Department of Law, University of Kerala. She has a PhD in law from the Department of Law, University of Kerala. Her areas of interest are health and bioethics, equality of rights, and intellectual and property law. For her legal contributions in academics, academic contributions in legal studies, she has earned many awards: Sachivottama Shatabdi Memorial Prize, Muthunayaga Memorial Prize, Justice T. Krishnan Nair Memorial Gold Medal Endowment, Fatima Bibi Endowment Award, Govinda Pillai Gold Medal for Law. So we have a very distinguished, academically brilliant faculty for the morning session today. She has been an invited speaker in many national and international forums, many national and international paper publications, and she is an active member of NUAL's research committee and is a research guide for the university. So we are really privileged to have Dr. Adira PS for our morning session to introduce to us the intellectual property rights involved in biomedical research. We welcome you, ma'am. The floor
Thank
is
you.
yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to thank Dr. Ajit as well as Dr. Akash, who have they've honored me with their invitation, and I'm very happy to be a part of this very prestigious program. I hope I'm audible. Yes?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, let me thank Rajagiri for this wonderful
opportunity. Ma'am, audible. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. So I would be sharing a slide here. Shall I move on with the talk, Dr. Ajit?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So,
I'm sorry. Yes. People will be joining in between. Please don't mind.
Yeah,
so this is a morning session.
All right, sir. So just a quick question. Are people allowed to, what is the pattern? Are the questions towards the end of the session, or can they ask doubts in between, whether it's interactive or not?
Usually the moderator records all the questions and it is posted to the speaker at the end of the session.
All right. Okay. Okay. I just had that doubt. Shall I start then, sir? With your permission. Yes. Is the screen visible? I hope the screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
Yes, thank you. So the topic that we are going to discuss here today is intellectual property rights in biomedical research. Now, this is a topic which is very, very wide. You can spend a whole lifetime researching on this and still not come anywhere. So for the scope of a 1 hour talk or 1.5 hour talk, I've reduced the topics and the theme or the scheme of my talk shall be like this. I will be explaining what the significance of intellectual property rights are and what its significance in health and biomedical innovations is, and why we actually need intellectual property rights at all in the first place. Secondly, I'll be moving on to the patents and biomedical inventions or research-related outcomes. And I'd just like to highlight certain case studies which have recently come up, which are of great significance to, I think, practitioners and academicians like yourself, like this, August gathering here today. And lastly, I would be talking about the do's and don'ts as researchers. What are the pitfalls that you need to look out for, and what are the what is expected from you when you're trying to obtain an intellectual property rights. So I'd start by mentioning that if you look at the progress of human evolution over since the time that human beings have started as a community to come together and function, we find that it is technology that has changed human life. And as per Stephen Hawking, the world has changed far more in the past 1 century than in any other before in history. And the reason he cites is that of technological changes. And that is actually perfectly true, because if you look at human evolution, you find there are various stages. You started from the hunter-gatherer, we came into the agrarian system. And if you look at the left side of the slide, you can see what actually heralded these changes. What are the technologies and what are the spheres of our existence which have been overhauled by specific technologies. And right now we have passed the information era or the data era. We've come now into the connection economy, wherein social media related inventions are considered to change the way humans function. And today, if you look at our lives in the past 6 months or so, from almost March onwards, we've been on lockdown, and they find that the nodes or the internet usage has increased multifold more than any other time in history, which means that our existence itself has been shifted to another plane altogether. All these technological changes have brought about a whole lot of inventions and innovations into our lives. And this is actually one of the reasons why we talk about intellectual property rights. Because if you look at the way the assets have been distributed as far as the market value of companies are concerned, if you look at the assets of companies from 1975 to 2015 or even 2020, you find there's a very clear shift in 1970s, where the tangible assets used to come to nearly 85%. Right now the focus has shifted and it is perfectly been inverted, so that right now it is intangible assets which have come up they kind of dominate the asset portfolios. And this is also evident if you look at who the richest companies in the world are, or who the richest people in the world are. They all relate to technology in some way or the other. You look at Amazon, look at Google or Microsoft. These are the people who handle the intangible assets, and they have huge intellectual property related asset portfolios. So this is a case which is relevant in copyright law. We'll be discussing that in a bit. But when we speak about private property, we usually understand tangible property, whether movable or immovable. But the scope of private property has been included, has been kind of extended to include intellectual property rights as well. So like you have land, or you have your furniture or movables, they are considered as property. But also the creations of your mind are also considered as property. And the shift from private property within private property to tangible as well as intangible property has been a huge change that has come up. It's not really recent. This has been going on since 1500s or so. But in recent times, intellectual property rights has assumed so much significance that if you look at what is expected from companies, what is expected from academicians, what is expected from institutions, we find that for instance, just to give you an example, NAC accreditation for universities, they demand that intellectual property rights be taught to students, whether you deal with law or not, especially if you come from a science stream. There is a mandate that you need to provide intellectual property related training to your students and your faculty. And that is one ingredient in NAC accreditation. So that is the way that the world is going right now, and intellectual property rights are gaining more significance every day. As I mentioned, intellectual property rights, they relate to creations of the human intellect. When you get an idea for a story, when you write a poem, you draw a painting, or you design something, all of these, or you invent something, they are creations which come from your brain, from your intellect. So these creations are granted rights under different headings within the larger scope of intellectual property rights. We have realized that for economic development, as well as for the social and cultural well-being of the people within an economy, we need intellectual property rights. I'll be explaining the relationship between innovation and society in a bit. But before that, let me just speak about the intellectual property definition, which has been given by the WIPO, or the World Intellectual Property Organization. So this organization is a unit of a United Nations organization right now. And they administer a lot of treaties, international treaties, which talk about intellectual property rights. It defines IP as creations of the mind, such as inventions for which patents are granted, literary and artistic works for which copyright is granted, designs for which industrial design rights are granted, symbols, names, and images used in commerce for which trademarks are granted. So depending on the type of creations of the mind, you have specific type of intellectual property right, which protects those creations. Now, understanding IP is a bit like the six blind men or five blind men trying to find out what an elephant is. So, depending on who you ask, they have a different perception of intellectual property, right? There are some who talk about IP as being a bane of human existence and progress, and they say that we are better left off without intellectual property rights. Then there are some who say that intellectual property rights are pivotal to progress and for technology transfer. So there is yet another faction like Nikola Tesla or others who believe that intellectual property rights, whether they are copyrights or patents, they do not really cover the entire driving force of why people invent anything. So that is also true, because you don't write stories, or you don't sing, or you don't perform because you want an intellectual property right, but because it does something that helps you to better evolve as a human being. Sometimes you're compelled to do so. But in any case, that is not something which is covered under intellectual property rights per se, except perhaps moral rights. So moral rights are also a very important part of intellectual property rights. You hear about plagiarism, you hear about infringement, you hear about people downloading movies or songs without permission from the owners of copyright. Now that is a very clear violation of the rights of the creator. So if we don't give that right, then society may completely disregard the contributions of the inventors. That is also one aspect of intellectual property right. There are many types of intellectual property rights. In fact, it's an eclectic collection of an assortment of rights. Because we don't have too much time, I'm not going in depth into it. I'll be concentrating on patents, because that's the most important IP right as far as biomedical research is concerned. So just to give you an idea about what IP is, what all it contains, you understand that we have patents, we have trademarks, which, as I mentioned, they relate to logos or signs or symbols. Industrial designs appeal to the aesthetic or visual sense of its viewer. When you see a very well-designed product, it actually speaks to you, and it creates a good impression. That is what industrial designs seek to protect. Plant varieties, different types of plant varieties, tubers, crops, etc. They are protected under the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights Act in India. If copyrights, so as I mentioned, artistic, literary, dramatic, other works, creative works are protected under copyrights. What you write, when you write an article or you publish a book, you as the author have copyright over the specific work. Then geographical indications. Those of you who are from places where you have a rich culture and tradition, as most parts of India are, we are familiar with geographical indications, whether we speak about Palakkad and Matta rice, or you speak about Tirupati laddu, or you speak about Alfonso mangoes. We are actually talking about geographical indications, which are products which have a relationship to the origin, to the place of origin. Then we have layout designs of integrated circuits. So chips which are used in electronic items, that IC circuits, they have certain design. So how that particular design is and what are the semiconductor devices which are used, depending on that, intellectual property rights may be granted. There is another section of intellectual property rights which protects information. Like, for example, you may have heard about KFC, the Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe, or Coca-Cola. These recipes or the ingredients in them, they are not common knowledge. They seek to protect it with great deal of trouble. So those are actually protected through what are called as trade secrets. So all of these are intellectual property rights. But since we don't have too much time to go into it, because certain types of confidential information and certain types of plant varieties, biodiversity or TK related information, all of these have something to do with biomedical research. Wherever it is relevant, I'll be speaking about that as well. There are different types of intellectual property rights. There are formal IP, like patents, trademarks, designs, plant varieties, geographical indications, and copyright. They are formal IP because there's a very definite structure for protection. Then you have informal IP, over which we don't really have a legislative structure, but still, as far as unfair competition related activities are concerned, the courts do intervene in spite of there being no clear legal structure. So if you want to find out why IP is so important, let's just take the example of when Google took over Motorola. One specific patent with respect to that portfolio which was taken over by Google, it cost nearly 500,000 US dollars, and that's a huge amount of asset. And non-tech also, for example, in 2009, you may be familiar with the case wherein SBI took over the trademark of an airline brand as a collateral for a 2,000 rupee Trove loan. It didn't turn out to be that good decision, but still that is allowed. You are allowed to mortgage or you're allowed to pledge your intellectual property rights, just like you can do so with your gold or other kinds of tangible property. Now, informal protection as well. For example, trade secrets, just because it's informal doesn't mean it's less important. There was an industrial espionage case in which Colon Industries, they were held liable for theft of 149 trade secrets, and the damages or the compensation that they had to pay came to nearly $6.3 million per trade secret. So the amount of compensation that they had to pay for stealing this information, which is an intellectual property, it cost them billions of dollars. Then there are other models for business. For example, traditional knowledge utilization, which is very widely happening across the world. In India, it's largely unsuccessful. There are certain exceptions. For example, towards the right side of the slide, you can see the example of a plant, which you can see there, which is called Arogya Pacha, or healthful green when translated. It is a plant which grows in the Agastya Hills in Kerala. And Kani tribes, who are tribal communities, have been conserving that specific plant for a long period of time. And they revealed the specific nature or the pharmacological properties were identified by certain scientists from the TBGRI, and they patented the components from this particular plant. And then they entered into an agreement with the Aryavaidya pharmacy in Coimbatore and started manufacturing a product called Jeevani, which was sold as a an antioxidant, immuno-boosting, anti-fatigue drug, or a biostimulant, and it was sold extensively in United States as well as Europe. And there were some benefits which were transferred back to the community. So this is an example of how traditional knowledge can be used to give patentable product, and how biomedical research may be largely beneficial when you concentrate on this. Where we have 6,000 plus, nearly 7,000 plants which are regularly used in traditional medicine in India, but research has not been undertaken to such an extent that we can tap the entire potential. So while doing that, we need to make sure that it amounts to bioprospecting rather than biopiracy. So bioprospecting is the legal use of such resources, whereas biopiracy is the illegal use wherein you exploit the community or the resources without the green signal from the government. Coming back to what the role of intellectual property is, it helps to market or manufacture the product and develop a loyal clientele. Whether we talk about patents or trademarks, we have that reputation which is also connected with your intellectual property rights. It increases FDI, technology transfer, R&D, etc. To give you certain examples, there are IT companies which are based right here in Kerala, which have been taken over by Amazon or Google because of the patents that they hold. So yes, it brings in foreign investment as well. And IP commercialization, it results in huge revenue gain. That is also true about huge multinational companies as well as smaller MSMEs, etc. Source of securing competitive advantage. So you may have heard about the 5G patents going on, and Huawei being driven out by United States through its policy decisions. So that is because as far as the 5G patent races are concerned, Huawei is now leading the race. And so the decision to secure competition, that becomes political as well. So that's just an example. It drives creativity and innovation. So when you have more and more patents, the idea is that we are constantly inventing and innovating and reinnovating, which drives the society forward. So all of these are performed by intellectual property rights. Now, this is actually a part of the election, promises by Obama. So when Obama was to be chosen, he was up for the term. This is part of the election manifesto, in the sense that Obama was promising to take strong actions against patent trolls in the United States of America. We cannot really imagine such an election promise in India because we have not really reached to that extent. But the point of this particular, picture or this particular GIF is that in USA, this problem of patent trolls was rampant. What these patent trolls are non-performing entities which do not really do any innovation, which do not really market any product. They wait until somebody starts inventing, somebody starts producing goods, and then they file suits against the inventors and try to settle it out of court for huge sums of money. And this was draining the business in United States of America, so much so that the cost of litigation, which comes up to billions of dollars, that was draining away the economy. So this is something that you need to understand, that IP plays a huge part in defining how that specific society or how that economy functions as well. In the United States, there is now a very strong rule that a person who's just undertaking litigation as a nuisance, they'll be awarded with the costs as well as damages. So if you talk about the economics of intellectual property rights, we know that in any market, when the demand and supply interact, there comes a position where the equilibrium is arrived at, where you have the price and the quantity stabilized. It is at this particular equilibrium that we have the proper balance between price and quantity. So as far as the intellectual property rights are concerned, this particular stability, it only stays for some point of time because people have to invent and reinvent, and this particular position has to change. If creativity is not encouraged by rewards, then no one might create, no one might file for patent. And if the society does not protect the rights of the inventor, then his creations become redundant because others can imitate freely. And cost of imitation is actually very negligible. The cost of production versus the cost of imitation is very negligible. For instance, in order to create a specific integrated circuit chips where you have to invest millions and billions of dollars, the cost of copying it is very, very negligible. It comes up to less than hundreds of dollars. So when there is such a disparity, if intellectual property rights are not granted, then it will ultimately result in the detriment of the society as well. So Schumpeter was an economist who said that the role of societies is to change and to reinvent itself so that the resources that we have in the hands of the people, it has to come up with better and more creative models. And he spoke about creative destruction. If you understand how life was before internet and after internet, this point becomes very clear. Before the internet also we used to live happily. But after internet has come into being and has exploded as far as the economical and the technological aspects are concerned, internet now pervades every aspect of our existence. Right now we are communicating with each other over the internet. And this was not possible, if we had such a pandemic in a pre-internet era, this would not have been possible. So we are reinventing ourselves. We are coming over obstacles. So the picture that you can see there is that of the US during Great Depression. So Schumpeter's idea was that when a particular model of development becomes stagnant, then the society will face that loss, and then from that loss you have to come over, and that is what he called as a gale of creative destruction. And this destruction, or this creative destruction, is led by technology. And that is also the reason why we have patents at all. So this is just a provision from the United States Constitution, wherein they talk about the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited time. So the monopoly which is granted to the creator is for a limited time. and the exclusive right to their respective writings as far as copyright is concerned, discoveries or inventions where patents are granted. If we don't give that protection, that people might not invent and the society may come across with stagnation. So that is one thing that we need to keep in mind. Now, what is a patent? So if you think about it, you are an inventor, you invented something. Why is it that you need to file a patent? Why can't you keep it as a secret? Now, the reason why that is so is because if you keep it as a secret, tomorrow if someone else invents the same thing, either with your, with your contributions, knowingly or unknowingly contributed, or they come across it by themselves, then they will go and file the patent, and you, irrespective of whether you are the first inventor or not, you will not be able to market or produce the particular invention which you invented in the first place. And also the second party should be able to prevent you from even working on that specific invention. So as an inventor, it is imperative that you obtain a patent if you want to capitalize on the commercial possibilities of that invention. And that is the reason why we have disclosure of invention as one of the conditions of grant of patent. So when the inventor discloses his invention to the society grants him the exclusive right over that invention. So what this means is that the society gains the benefit of the know-how which is voluntarily contributed by the inventor. So suppose you have invented something for the first time. There are many inventions which are considered as life-changing. You can think about, Ziploc, or you can think about small things that we see usually. Those inventions, they may work in a particular way. You know the best method of working. You know what the ingredients are. You need to reveal everything to the patent office, and in return for that, they'll give you the exclusive right to make, use, sell, export, or import that specific invention within that country which grants you the patent, which means that you can exclude others, and that right to exclusion is a very important part of patent. So this quid pro quo between the inventor and society is very, very important, because if this balance is not preserved, then it would ultimately result in the detriment of both the inventors as well as the society. So technological progress is much based on this invention. Like I said, it adds to the portfolio. It helps the society also because it gets better and improved products. Patent law, it talks about new industrially applicable inventions. So something which is usually familiar to people, you cannot really get a patent on. You need to talk about a new industrially applicable or useful invention. And if you consider the different types of IP protection, patent gives you the strongest framework for protection when compared to any other IP. You have the entire exclusive right over that specific invention for a period of 20 years. So from the time of filing, you alone enjoy the monopoly for 20 years. Monopoly means that you are the only person who is allowed to dictate how that specific invention is to be marketed or used. So this is very strong, and patent is not an automatic one. For example, you have invented something. You cannot get a patent just because you've invented it first. You may even tell people that you are the first person who invented it. But unless and until that patent is actually granted formally, you will not get any right. This is quite different from a trademark or a copyright, because if you publish a paper, or if you publish a book, or if you perform a song in public, then automatically copyright vesting in you. That is an automatic vesting of rights in copyright or trademark. Whereas in patents, it's never automatic. So if you look at history of patents, you find that as early as 1300s or 1200s in Greece, they used to give recipes monopoly. So the chef who comes up with a new recipe is granted monopoly for an entire year. Similarly, in in England, before it became Great Britain and others, you hear about the first patents which were granted. So 1300s, the first patent was granted to one John Kemp of Flanders for teaching the people of England how to weave woolen clothes. Similarly, you can see the stained glass windows there. John of Utenham was granted a patent for stained glass. You can see letter patent there. So this letters patent means it is an order from the sovereign granting this exclusive right to a person. Even today, the patents which are granted by the patent office by the government of India, they also follow the same pattern where there's a sealed letter of patent which gives you that recognition, that monopoly through a certificate. So if you look at how patent has evolved in India, so this is a bit technical, you don't need to understand everything about it. But after TRIPS agreement has been mandatorily incorporated into the WTO framework, post 2005, we had to change a lot of our laws to bring it in compliance with TRIPS. There were lots of legislations which have been newly implemented. And also our patent law, more importantly, we had to bring in product patent as well as process patent. We needed to give patents to chemicals, to foodstuff, to medicines, which was not really something which we did earlier to 2005. So generic pharma, which is flourishing from 1970s onwards, they had to go back a bit, retreat a bit because of the changes that patent law brought about. Now, can anyone identify who this person is? Are the participants allowed to unmute themselves?
The participants will be on mute, but if you want, you can ask them.
Okay. So, can anyone identify this gentleman? I thought I was the odd one out because I am not a person from science background. Okay, so this is this is Alexander Fleming, who invented penicillin. So we all know the famous story we have studied in school, etc., wherein Alexander Fleming went over vacation, and when he came back, he saw his petri dishes full of Staphylococcus, which is also shown here, and he found that wherever certain kind of fungi grew, the Staphylococcus colonies were destroyed. And so he did a little bit more research, and then he had help from others in the William Downes School as well, and he invented penicillin. And penicillin was a great invention because if you consider and compare the First World War with the Second World War, you will find that the death rate due to infection, it came to a fraction of what it was. For example, in the First World War, the death rate, mortality rate was 18%. 18 out of every 100 injured died, whereas in the Second World War, 1 out of every 100 died. So this was a huge achievement, and he was awarded a Nobel Prize as well for his invention. But if you think about it, he didn't really invent it as such. It was a serendipitous kind of an invention because he did it by accident. That does not detract from the nature of the invention. So the point I'm trying to make is whether you did it deliberately, like Edison, who went through lots of different options for the light bulb and ultimately hit on tungsten. Just like that, you don't need to you don't need to establish whether it was a deliberate invention or whether it was an accidental one. Another person who became a millionaire at the age of 18 because of a serendipitous invention was Mr. Perkin, Dr. Perkin, who by mistake, when he was trying to extract quinine for malaria, as a student, he accidentally mixed up some things and he got this purple colored dye, which revolutionized fashion business. And he later on went to establish a chemical business, which manufactured dyes or others, and he became a huge industrialist. So inventions can be accidental, it can be deliberate. But what matters is that they should be capable of protection. So I'm quickly going into what patent means. Patent generally means a patent for any invention, patented article and process. Like I mentioned, product can be patented, also process can be patented. Patentee is the person who's entered in the register as a grantee or proprietor. We'll be discussing more about this in the coming slides, and I'll help you to understand the concept. Invention is a new product or a process. It should have an inventive step and it should be capable of industrial application. Again, this also I'll come to it. Just need to understand that after 2005 amendment to our Patent Act of 1970, we need to talk about the state of the art. So just keep in mind this specific phrase, state of the art, and we'll again be discussing this in detail in the coming slides. I'll simplify the concept. So just a graphical representation of how you actually go into patent office and come out successful. So you have an idea whether it is Perkins' famous accidental invention or a penicillin or Edison's invention of a light bulb. The idea which you should be able to translate into a workable invention should be very, very clearly outlined in your application form. That application may be provisional, it may be complete. So provisional means that you have an idea, you have resolved how to get about with it, and you apply for a provisional specification, which means that you have stake in patent system as well as most IP. It depends on who is the first person to file. So you need to be the first person to file because there is no second prize in IP. So you get the idea, you result in an invention, and then you take the idea to the patent office through a specification and a completed application form. You submit it to the patent office, and in patent office you have the administrative framework. You have people called the patent examiners who are well versed in specific areas of technology. For instance, if you look at the Chennai patent office, for instance, you have so many assistant controllers of patents, joint controllers, and all these people, they are well versed in a specific area of tech. It can be biotech, it can be biomedical tech, it can be microbiology, it can be physics, it can be chemistry, it can be mechanical engineering, it can be any different sphere of scientific and technological application. So you take the patent application and you submit it there. Depending on the specific tech over which you have applied patent for, the examiner will look into your application and see whether you comply with certain hurdles. So you as an inventor have to satisfy subject matter requirement. So your patent should be one which is capable of protection and should not be limited or proscribed under the intellectual property laws, the Patent Act of 1970. Utility. So if your invention is not useful, then they will not give you a patent. Novelty. Your invention should be new. New in the sense it should be absolutely new anywhere in the world. That is very, very important. Okay. If your invention is just a spin-off of something else which is already known, you will not get a patent. Non-obviousness. So this actually is a very interesting concept, because what this means is that suppose you are a chemist or you are a microbiologist and you know your business, you know a particular organism which has been manipulated, and you think that it is new and it has utility and it is not prevented from being patented under the Patents Act of 1970. With that, you will not get a patent. A person who's ordinarily skilled in the art should be able to look at your invention and think, oh, I did not think about this. So what it needs is that your creation should have some element which is not obvious to another person who's also skilled in that specific art or that specific technology. Okay. Disclosure. Like I said, what is it that you are revealing? You're revealing what the invention is, what are the ingredients, how you actually cause the technological advantage with the operation of your invention. You need to explain what is the best method of working your invention is. Only if you disclose it completely will you get the patent. So once you have crossed all these hurdles, you may be granted a patent. So depending on what your claims are, you will be granted patent, and that patent will extend over 20 years from the date of filing. Okay. And once you have a patent, then you can go into the marketplace and try to commercialize your invention and get the proverbial pot of gold. So like I mentioned, you require all of these. And I'll just talk about the last part where the disclosure, I'll explain how the specification is and what are the claims. But understand that these three are very, very important. You need a written description. You need to enable the patent examiner or any other person to recreate your invention. And also the claims should be very, very clearly outlined. So suppose you have invented something, and I know that in Rajagiri also there are certain patents which have been filed by certain members of the faculty. There are many colleges which have faculty members who have patented their inventions in physics, in chemistry, in biotechnology, etc. So what you actually need to understand is that compared to whatever knowledge existed in that sphere until the date of that particular invention or the date in which you're filing, your invention should be completely new. If it is not new, it will not be granted a patent. So anything which existed before that can be a reference. For instance, suppose you have brought about a lock which will a lock which cannot be tampered with. So that lock should be compared with all other locks which existed before the date of filing. And if there existed any other model of lock anywhere in the world which is comparable to your own, then yours is not a new invention. Okay. So this is an example where there were two rival companies who brought out contact lenses which you could wear overnight. So this is a decision which came in 2010, but the technology was available before that as well. Now the point I was trying to make is, suppose you have a new invention, or you think something is new and you patent it. You need to be aware of what the competition is. You need to look into the question of whether there are other people who have similar products in the market, because patent is a very expensive process. Before you go into it, it's much better to do a freedom to operate study to find out what the other patents are in this existing domain. And if you don't do that, what happened in this case is that these people, they filed a counterclaim. So you alleged somebody violated your IP and sued them. They sued you back, and then the court said that if you just see anything and then see if they work, and then just because it works, you claim patent, that doesn't help you, because patent may be granted and you may have spent lakhs of rupees, but the patent may be revoked at a later point of time if it is not strong. So it's much better to go through the entire due diligence and then file a patent, because after spending all that money, if you find that the patent is a very weak one, it doesn't help you at all, and you may suffer from loss. So this is an example of a specification. I've chosen a very, very simple invention, which is a dated one. It's quite an old one, 1970 patent, which is a cheese slicer. Okay, so this is a patent specification is what is called as a techno-legal document, because you deal with technology, you explain how it works, and also you need to mention what it is that you're claiming as a right. Just a minute, let me have some water. Okay, so you have the specification which contains the following components. You need to give a description of the technical problem. So any invention is about solving a problem. So what was the technical problem which they faced and how you solved it? That is exactly what you describe. If there are drawings, and mostly patent applications do have drawings, you need to provide them. So claims means what it is that you're claiming. So claims define the scope of your rights. A slicing device for cheese and the like. It's a very simple explanation. Comprising, what exactly are the components of your invention? These are the 4 components. Okay, so you have a base with a passageway, you have a U-shaped bar, you have a rotating handle, and you have a cutting element. So what this is just a base which has a U-shaped bar which can be turned, then a rotating handle at the end of the bar, and a cutting edge like a knife at the end of it. So you can actually rotate it and slice the cheese. That is the simple thing. So if I'm speaking plain English, I'll just explain it like this. But in a patent application, this is not how it works. Instead, the base will be described as a base providing a flat cutting surface and having a passageway extending inwardly from an edge thereof parallel to said flat cutting surface and displaced down from the plane thereof. Complicated the matter. Why that is so is because of two reasons. One is it's possible to obfuscate what the invention is because if you feel that it gives you a better chance. It can be that you're clarifying what the claims are, because if somebody has produced an invention which is very similar to your own, it is these claims which give you the leverage to accuse the other person of having infringed your rights. Infringement means violating or taking away or cheating you out of a particular right. So the point I'm trying to make is you may be an inventor, you know how the invention works, but in order to mention what exactly is covered by your invention and what is not covered by your invention, you may not be equipped to do so because of the peculiarity of the patent system itself, which is the reason we have filing agents to file patents. You have people who are well versed in technology rather than law, or sometimes both technology and law, to draft patent petitions. So this is how we look at novelty. Like I mentioned, suppose there is a publication, an article which talks about an invention which is very similar to your own, though that person has not made it. What you do to find out if this is a new invention or not is to compare your invention with that reference, which can be an article, which can be an earlier patent, which can be an earlier invention. In any case, what you do is you try to find out the different claim elements. As I mentioned, there are 4 claim elements to this particular invention. You have the base, you have the U-shaped bar, you have the rotating handle, and you have the knife or the cutting edge. So these are the 4 claim elements. If this specific prior art has all those elements, then this would be a prior art reference which completely covers the invention which is being filed, which means that your invention will not be granted a patent. So let's examine, yes, that specific article which was published in 1974, which is in cheese industry today. It mentions U-shaped bar, it mentions the tightened wire, it mentions the passageway, and it mentions the rotating handle. So since all of these elements are covered in a single reference, your application will be rejected. So what is important to understand is that there is a priority date. Whenever you feel that this is the time that I have at least solved the problem a bit, so that I know that within 6 months or so I can complete my invention, the best thing is to immediately file for a provisional specification. So the date on which you file is the date of priority. So after that date, no matter who files their specification, even if it is complete, you will be given the priority. So this is what is called as a first past the post system. Just like in a race, you see people racing or you see horses racing, and whoever just a bit they pass that post, they are considered as a winners. Just like that, on the date that you filed, anything before that date is prior art. So if your invention is better or newer or more inventive than anything in the prior art, you will be granted patent. And who exactly is the person who's looking into the inventive concept? A normally skilled but unimaginative person. So suppose you are a chemist, the person who is an imaginary person who will be looking into your invention would be a normally skilled chemist, but he should not be too imaginative, because imaginative people can imagine anything. So we don't want that. We want an unimaginative person who has common general knowledge of the concerned art and knew when he looks into that specific invention, he finds out, oh, this is nothing new. This is something which is already existing. In that case, there's nothing inventive about it. But suppose that person says, no, this is different from what used to exist earlier, and this person has solved that problem better than what was available earlier, then it means that it is inventive. Okay. The reason why this is important is because this is a case which came in Great Britain in 1980s, and it's an interesting case because it dealt with a surfboard. You know that surfing is done in near oceans. This happened in Australia, where a 12-year-old boy, just a 12-year-old boy, he had customized his surfboard and he was surfing in the ocean, and he had a lot of followers. He was a very popular, very skilled surfer, though he was only 12. So this Tabomarine company, they wanted to, patent a surfboard, but the opposition came because the board that this 12-year-old boy was using in public before that had the same technology, and people had seen it, he had used it, and people were aware about it. So there is nothing inventive about it. People already were aware of it, which means that the patent could not have been granted. So, as I mentioned, there are certain qualifiers which talks about subject matter. So, every subject matter cannot be patented. There are certain exceptions. For instance, there was, in California and in certain parts of the world, cannabis or marijuana, it is considered as legal. It can be used. Whereas in India and in most parts of the world, it is considered as illegal. So in California, an invention which talks about the best extraction of the products from cannabis can be considered as a legal invention. Whereas if that particular invention is filed in India, the Indian Patent Office will reject it because it is not legal in India. Similarly, there are certain qualifiers. Section 4 talks about atomic energy related invention. So if your invention talks about how plutonium can be enriched better, then it cannot be patented because the central government will take up that invention. Ordinary people like us, we are not supposed to have a patent relating to atomic energy. So grammatically, we can represent it like this. If you have an invention which is different from an innovation, which is different from a discovery. So innovation can be Uber. Uber is an innovation, because Swiggy can be an innovation because they brought in a new platform to do something better than we were used to do. But that's not a patentable invention. Discovery. Suppose you go to the deepest, darkest jungle and find out a specific plant variety or a specific animal variety. It's just a discovery. You may have your name attached to the species name, but it's not an invention. An invention, it needs to have inventive step, it needs to have novelty, it should be useful, and it should be capable of being applied in an industrial context. And if it complies with the requirements of sections 3 and 4, which prescribe subject matter, and section 10, which speaks about revealing the information relating to the invention, that can be granted either a product or a process patent, as the case may be. There are certain things which are not patentable. So towards the right, you can see the picture of a person who's using a chopstick which has a fan attached to it. So is this a good invention? Is this something which you would buy? You are eating noodles, you need to cool it, you don't want to blow on it and waste your time and energy. Instead, you just switch on the fan and then it cools down by itself. This is an example of a frivolous invention, and most probably it will not be granted patent. Sorry. So you also have sections 3B and 3C, which speaks about an invention, the primary use of which is contrary to public order or morality, or which causes serious prejudice to human, animal, or plant life or health, or to the environment. So recently, a patent examiner in Chennai Patent Office was mentioning an example wherein a Japanese company had invented a cigarette, a specific kind of cigarette which uses a filter, and it is a filter for which a patent was claimed. The filter allows more nicotine to enter the human body. That was the invention. So he says, the examiner, he says that cannot be allowed, because what it does is it allows more harmful things to enter into the lungs of the smoker, which is contrary to public health expectations. So firstly, when we do actually allow cigarettes to be sold, whether that is a good decision or not is a different question. But generally, in such cases, the patent law can prevent an invention from being patented. Similarly, stem cell related inventions wherein the embryos have to be destroyed in order to get those blastocyst cells, which are used to get stem cell related inventions. In that case also, European courts and others have held that patents cannot be granted. Similarly, like I mentioned, mere discovery of a living thing or a non-living thing cannot be accepted as a patentable invention. Section 3 clause D may be important to you because it is possible to explain a specific substance in different ways. For example, salts, esters, ethers, polymers, metabolites, pure form, depending on particle size, isomers, mixtures, complexes, combinations, and other derivatives. These are all considered to be the same substance. So suppose there is a chemical which can be represented in each of these forms. For every one of these forms, you cannot gain patent. It has to, if you are able to show that there is a significant difference in properties with regard to efficacy, then it is an exception. Then in that case, patent can be granted. A very good example is the nanotech. So nano silver particles are not similar to silver particles. They may have additional properties. For instance, they're used in curing, removing tumors or treating cancer in certain cases. So if that is the case, then due to additional efficacy, the patent may be granted. So this provision is very, very important as far as chemistry is concerned, and drugs and medicines as well. Just adding properties, it does not mean that it is patentable. Mere arrangement or rearrangement or duplication which functions independently of one another is not patentable. An example would be a pencil which has an eraser attached to its end. A pencil writes and an eraser erases. So they work very well to, separately. If you just put them together, it means you have a pencil which also has an eraser. It's only bringing together elements which work well independently. So in this, it may be relevant to you because we speak about sections 3 clause H, which speaks about agriculture or horticulture related methods. So traditional methods of agriculture or horticulture are not patentable in India. This means that suppose you find out there is a new method of tissue culture, etc., it may not be granted patent, but as far as the products of this technology are concerned, they may be patented. So that is one difference. Medical devices which are used in agriculture or horticulture are capable of patenting. But methods or processes which deals with these may not be patentable, meaning that if there is a process for medicinal, surgical, curative, preventive, diagnostic or therapeutic methods of treating human beings or animals or similar processes, they are not patentable. So suppose you invent how to do surgery better, a new method of performing surgery, that method is not patentable. But suppose you invented a surgical thread which is better than the existing ones, that can be granted patent. So we need to understand the apparatus or equipment which are used in this, they are patentable. But the methods itself or the processes itself may not be patentable. So this is a very confusing area because there are some cases which go either way. But generally, devices or apparatus or equipment which deals with this are patentable. Similarly, plants or animals in whole, other than microorganisms, are not patentable. So if you invent a new plant variety by genetic modification, you can get a plant variety protection under the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights Act of 2001, but you cannot get a patent for it. The only exception is microorganisms. Suppose you have invented a microorganism through genetic modification, which is completely different from the existing microorganisms, you can get a patent. The others are not really relevant to you, but I just wanted to give you the full list. Literary, dramatic, artistic works are copyright protected, not patent. Method of performing a mental act, how to play chess, they are not patentable. presentation of information, a diary or a directory or a reference book. They are just presentation of information, not protectable under patent. Integrated circuits, they are also not patentable. Traditional knowledge, like I explained, in itself an invention which is a traditional knowledge is not capable of being patented. So this is the site of IP India. If you are interested, please do go through this, and you will find details relating to each of these intellectual properties that we discussed. Since I have a little bit of, I'm running a bit short of time, I'll quickly go into the next. Any person who is a true and first inventor or his assignee or legal representative can make an application. So if you are a person who's an independent inventor, you can invent something and you can file it in your own name. But if you are an employee of a company or an institution or a university, you need to look into your specific employment contract to understand what happens to any invention that you make. For instance, most of the universities, they hold patents. Sorry. Okay. Most of the universities, they hold patent for themselves, and what happens is the person who has invented it should be mentioned as the author or the creator, though the rights may vest with the university. So depending on where you are from, which place you are from or your residence is, you can decide which patent office to file to. You can also file it outside India, in US or other places, but you need, as an Indian, you need permission from India to file in those jurisdictions. And this is the zones which have been divided. If you are from New Delhi related areas, that is the office. Similarly, you have a Mumbai office, a Kolkata office, and a Chennai office. There are different ways of filing for a patent. Like I mentioned, provisional patent can be filed. A complete patent may be filed. Complete specification, if it is already filed, then within 12 months under the Paris Convention, you can file in other countries. If you are filing it under PCT application, which is the Patent Cooperation Treaty administered by the World Intellectual Property Organization, you can actually file in 153 states. So this is better because if your invention, you feel it has significance in a lot of tech related areas. This is the latest number. Samoa, which is an African country, joined in 2020. Though it joined in 2019, its accession came effective this year. So if you want, you can choose any of these jurisdictions in your patent application and you can file. So the benefit of PCT system is that you need patent in all jurisdictions, not 153 because it's very expensive. You need to file, you need to pay fees for each and every jurisdiction. So it's better not to file everywhere, but pick and choose jurisdictions and mention that when you're filing itself in your PCT application, mention the countries where you intend to file, and within 30 months, you need to file specifically in those countries. This is more unified because it's more standardized and it allows you to conduct an international search. So if you go through the system, you find that there are international applications which you can file with your own regional office. For example, the Chennai Patent Office is a receiving office and you can file the international application there. The receiving office transmits it to international search authorities, which will consider all the prior art. It will look into documents, it will look into inventions, it will look into other details, and then give a report to the World Intellectual Property Organization International Bureau. You may also have an option of directly sending it to WIPO, which is also relevant. Now, in any case, the WIPO publishes it on Patent Scope, which is a database which contains details of patents which are filed. And once that report has been obtained, the designated offices, the offices where you have claimed patent, it can be US, it can be European Union, it can be China, it can be Japan, whichever country you want patent, you designate them. And in all those designated offices, you need to file patent fees. Yes, you need to file patent fees, but you will get multiple patents in multiple jurisdictions. So this is a good thing if you want to file for patent in more than one jurisdiction. So complete specification contains the following details. It's in Form 2 and you have to pay the required fees as well. Title of the invention, field, which is your field, use, the utility that you have found, prior art, drawbacks, what is the advantage of your invention by comparing between prior art and your own invention, aim, summary of the present invention, brief description of the drawings as I have already mentioned, statement of invention, claims, the detailed description, drawings and the claims which you are actually claiming. That is very, very important. And the abstract. So abstract is a small, like a précis kind of a document wherein you include the summary of what your invention is. You need to fully and particularly describe the invention. You need to disclose the best method of working the invention. In your opinion, what is the, for example, if it's a chemical compound, what is the best method of obtaining that chemical compound has to be disclosed. If it is a biological material, there are two ways. One is microorganism. If you're dealing with a microorganism, you have to deposit it in the International Depository Authority. We have two under the Budapest Treaty, which relates to submission of microorganisms. You have one office in Pune and Chandigarh where you can deposit it. They'll conduct the relevant studies and decide if it's actually a new organism or if it's just a discovery. If you're talking about a patent relating to a biological resource like a plant or an animal or something like that, then you have to get permission from the National Biodiversity Authority established under the Biodiversity Act of 2002. And after all this, you have to very clearly mention the claims that you have filed. Application in Form 1, complete specification, drawings, abstract, statement and undertaking saying that I am the person who is the first and true inventor, that should be provided. Declaration as to inventorship, request for examination. So this is important. Under Form 18, you can ask for a request for examination. Under Form 18A, you can ask for an expedited examination, which means that you can ask them to examine your application as early as possible within a month. Then power of attorney, if you are filing it through someone else, you need to give a power of attorney. All of them should be in duplicate. All of these have to be given in multiple copies. You can also file online. So online filing fees are a bit different. And you can find fees in the IP India site that I just mentioned. 1,600 rupees for individual, 4,000 rupees for small entities or MSMEs, and 8,000 rupees for a corporate entity. That is exactly how the fees work. So these are the stages. This is called patent prosecution. This entire process is called patent prosecution. The filing of patent application, as I mentioned. Publication, normally it takes 18 months. For 18 months, it will be preserved as secret and then it will be published. In early publication, which you have to file Form 9 and Form 18A, you need to mention that you need an early publication and they'll publish it within a month from your filing. In any case, after it is published, people can oppose. A person who's interested can oppose and say that this patent should not be granted. So if there is no pre-grant opposition or if the opposition has been successfully overcome, then the application will be examined. And during examination, the first examination report will come out. And in that there may be objections. If you clear all those objections, then the patent may be published. And after that, within a year, post-grant opposition can happen. So if the patent examiner is of the opinion that it should not be granted, it will be refused. So after this, you can go and if you have any complaints, you can Intellectual Property Appellate Board and from there to the Supreme Court of India. There are different ways in which pre-grant and post-grant opposition works. The other person can claim that this was already known or used or it should not have been granted or it is not disclosed completely, in which case opposition can happen. Because this is a biomedical related research, I will be highlighting. So this is Newton's famous law of gravity. It's not patentable. Physical phenomena, lightning, thunder, etc. not patentable. Abstract ideas like Pythagoras theorem is not patentable. There are certain controversial categories. I'm not going into all of them. I'm just mentioning living organisms. So Louis Pasteur got the first patent relating to a living. Um, Ajit sir, Ajit sir,
Yes, ma'am.
how long do I have?
You have up to 11:30, ma'am. You can continue.
11:30. Okay, all right. So
Another 20 minutes.
questions or discussions, when would it be?
Towards the last 10 minutes.
After
11,
11:30, 11:20.
11:20 to 11:30, if there are any.
All right. So I'll complete it with 11:20. So Louis Pasteur got the first patent for a living organism for purified yeast. So yeast was available even before that, but what Louis Pasteur did is he ensured germ-free or organic germ-free yeast, which is the article of manufacture, and it was granted a patent. This is Anand Chakrabarty, who was granted the first patent on a genetically modified organism for a pseudomonas bacteria which could eat up oil spills. So this is a new path of business. Anand Chakrabarty's case, that is Diamond versus Chakrabarty in 1970s in United States of America, wherein the Supreme Court famously said anything under the sun made by man is patentable. This was a huge opening of floodgates, and it led to a whole lot of patents being filed. The Harvard Oncomouse is a mouse which has a propensity to develop cancer, which makes it a very good instrument to do cancer research. In European jurisdiction, there was huge, controversies regarding this because a mice which catches cancer, that is an invention. Isn't that a bit immoral? So United States and Canada, they granted the patent. European Union, they refused it. Similarly, there are lots of patents in this. There are animals, genetically modified versions of animals, plants which are patented. Not the animals or plants per se, but the method of modifying them has been patented. Mice has been patented. Oranges, the different types of genetically modified oranges, soya beans, BT cotton and BT brinjal in our own country. They have all examples of how biotech patents have been expanded and they've just exploded all over the world. So I'll just be talking about two examples or two case studies which I feel are relevant to this discussion. The first is with regard to DNA or gene-related patents. We know that genes are very integral part of defining and delineating a human individual or all living organisms. So ATCG, that particular sequence, they are basically what comprise genes, and the combinations of these give those genes which define characteristics. Now the question is whether such genes can be patented. If they are isolated, can they be patented? The answer that US gives is that yes, it has granted patent to more than 99% of human genes. And what it means is that in our body, you cannot patent it. But when you purify it and you isolate it, the practice has been that these genes are patented. So who benefits from gene-related patents? If you're talking about a genetics lab, patents bring a lot of money. At the same time, these genes, they are linked to a lot of diseases like genetically transmitted diseases, inherited diseases, diseases which are due to genetic mutations like cancer or others. So in this case that I want to discuss is the Myriad Genetics case. So if you look at the timeline, there are two genes called BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, which if they are present in the human body in the active form, they may lead to breast cancer as well as ovarian cancer. So the Myriad Genetics, they obtained a patents which can be used to predict whether a person may develop ovarian cancer or breast cancer in future. And what they did is they filed a patent for it. Now, Myriad Genetics got the patent in 1997, and the Association for Molecular Pathology, they sued Myriad Genetics saying that the patent should not have been granted in the first place. So there were a lot of litigation going on, and the matter came before the Supreme Court in United States of America, and they discussed and they looked into the matter. So before I go into the judgment, let me just explain how they brought out this kit, a diagnostic testing kit for breast and ovarian cancer, which is called BRCA-analysis. What they do is they collect the personal and family history of that individual on whom the test is run. They run the test on them, and then combining the two information, the family history related information as well as the analysis result, they find out how much of a chance there is that a person might develop cancer in the future. So suppose they say you have a 80% chance of developing cancer in the future. Does it actually mean that you will develop cancer in the future? That is the question. In any case, in a very publicized strategy, what Myriad did is they brought out a breaking news that Angelina Jolie, who is a very famous movie star, she had undergone hysterectomy and mastectomy because she had undertaken this test, and the test results shows that she may develop cancer in the future. She endorsed this, and all hell broke loose, and people started buying, using this kit widely. And in fact, if you look at the specific figure, you can see that the stock prices of Myriad Genetics, they climbed up the charts after this particular gene risk scare story was released. This is a strategy. But the Supreme Court, they kind of put an end to this, saying that a patent cannot be granted to isolated DNA, and purely because DNA or genes have been isolated, it doesn't mean that it's a patentable invention. Only if it satisfied a twofold test. Firstly, that the subject matter should have a different characteristics, and that too markedly different characteristics from naturally occurring subject matter. Secondly, it should have a chemical identity which is distinctive from molecules existing in nature. So unless and until these two possibilities are satisfied, you cannot get a patent. This is interesting because after this, what it means is that purely because you have isolated a gene, it does not mean that you will be granted a patent. In this case, they had something called as a cDNA or a complementary DNA, which is different from usually existing DNA, and so they were granted patent only for cDNA. This has revolutionized genetic patents all over the world. And after this decision in December 2014, the USPTO also, the Patent and Trademark Office, they issued guidelines saying that only if they are structurally or functionally different can products of nature, not only genes, but any products of nature can be patented. In Australia, very famously, they revoked the patent of Myriad Genetics, saying that it is not conducive to public health. Another case study that I wanted to explain is the CRISPR case study. You are, I think you guys, the participants are in a better position to know about the scientific details of the CRISPR technology. This is Leila, the little girl in the picture. Leila was the first human being to be, subjected to CRISPR technology. Her leukemia was actually edited out of her genetic composition. So this is one of the success stories of CRISPR. More importantly, I wanted to talk about the battle which is going on between Broad Institute and the University of Berkeley. So you have Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier on one hand, who had filed for patent first, and then you have Feng Zhang, who claims to have CRISPR technology for eukaryotic cells. I'll explain what the thing is. So this is actually taken from a comic, science comic, which is written by Andy Warner, called Bad Blood. Sorry, what this means is that, so if you are interested, please do go through it. It's freely available on the net. They've explained that how these two, they found themselves at two ends of a bitter court battle. So CRISPR technology, if it actually comes about, if it is successful, then the expectation from it is that it might even bring Nobel Prize to the actual inventor. So basically what it does is, CRISPR is a gene editing tool. It enables you to snip away parts of the DNA helical structure and either insert something new or just repair and put it back to where we snipped it away. And it's based on the immune system of bacteria. So this is something which is known from 1970s, the clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats of CRISPR technology. They found that bacteria, it identifies viruses and keeps a part of the DNA sequence. And the scientists found that the same technology can be used to cut and paste the helical structure as well, the DNA sequence as well. And this is something which is the bone of contention between them. So Broad Institute, MIT, Harvard, Feng Zhang, he claims to have done work much earlier to UC Berkeley, Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier. So in June 2012, Doudna published a paper showing that this particular technology can be used to cut targeted sites. 2013, Zhang's lab announced that they had used it to split DNA in genes from cells of mice and humans. So the technology on one hand, and secondly, the application of it. So Doudna first filed for patent in 2013 March. Zhang filed for a patent 7 months later on October 15th. But what happened is, like I had mentioned, it's possible to expedite the review process. So a $70 fee was paid by Zhang's lab and they expedited the process and was granted the patent. Now Doudna went to court saying that she was the first person to file it. Now the reason why there is so much confusion is because there is a difference between the types of patents which were filed. Though they both relate to CRISPR, the subject matter is entirely different, which is the reason why there is so much of going on. But Zhang, he had to submit evidence in court saying that I started working on it in early 2012, and he showed the note issued by the lab saying that this is what I was working on. So it's important to keep your work records. But then the entire scientific community split on whether Doudna and Charpentier are the inventors or whether it is Zhang. So this is the reason why I said that when you do research, you need to first make sure that you have filed for a patent. Okay. So these two case studies, they are just two illustrations. If I want to talk about every biomedical research patent or IP, it's not possible within this short period of time. So I just go on to what are the do's and don'ts. I'll just give you an overview of the process which usually happens. You are the inventor. It is possible for you to apply for a patent on your own, but you need to make sure that it is legally sound. So this is the strategy which is usually adopted in filing a techno-legal document such as a specification. The persons who are filing it will receive the technology from you. The prior art will be found out and a drafting strategy will be plotted. There'll be web conferences with you. There would be meetings to finalize the strategy. First draft of patent specification will be rigorously checked for quality control. A legal review will be done. A technical review will be done and debates to cover possible workaround. You have to do a due diligence study, find out what are the patents which exist already in this specific field and see whether it is easy or it is possible to put your invention as a new one, whether it is possible to be patented. It will be given to you for review, and after the feedback and after finalization, the patent specification will be filed. It is important that the specification be filed as early as possible. At the same time, it should be sound. If it has major defects, then it may be rejected. So these are the do's that you need to keep in mind. So we need to remember that patents are first in time, first in right kind of intellectual property rights. You have to file immediately. Now, generally, academicians have this thing of publishing. You need to present a paper, you need to publish in Science or Nature or other journals. So it's important for you to publish, but we need to understand that publishing is only secondary to patent application. Once you publish, there is no leverage for you to give to the society. There is no disclosure to be made, and patent may be rejected. There is an exception these days. There is an amendment by which a 1-year period is granted as a leeway to inventors, but it's much better to not publish until and unless you have filed an application. Provisional specification should be filed as early as possible because it gives you time to work around it. Disclosure, who you disclose it to is also important. wherever you require another person to be a part of your study, either as a contracting out of testing out your part of software invention or others, it's much better to engage in non-disclosure agreements. And contracts, wherever you enter into them, employment contracts or others, you need to clearly understand the terms, see where the patents will stand granted. Sometimes they may exclude you completely, but if you are the inventor, if you are the creator, you do have a right to be acknowledged. So wherever you work, whatever work you do, please maintain clear timestamps of when you have undertaken specific work, and work record should be clearly mentioned, as you may have seen in the CRISPR case. So these are the takeaways that I would offer. And if you have any doubts or if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take it. I'll just, this is something which happened very near to our place. So this is Aurea Kati. She's actually, it's an anagram for AI haiku art. It's an AI being. She is not real. She's a virtual person who exists in the cloud. She writes haiku poems and she creates art from those poems. So these artworks and these poems, they're created by her. And she's not invented by an American or a foreigner. He was invented by a person from Kochi. His name is Liba Paul. He had visited Noires. And the point I'm trying to make is there are so many people creating things, inventing things, but we are not really filing for patents or obtaining copyrights for our software or others. It's much important. It's very, very important that we think about what inventions we are capable of and consult somebody who's in a position to advise you of whether there is a possibility to capitalize on your creativity. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. If you have any doubts, I'll be very happy to take them.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your enlightening speech on IPR rights. So I'll be posing the questions on behalf of the participants.
Yes.
Am I audible to you, ma'am?
Yes, you're audible. Just a sec. I'm trying to stop presentation.
Okay.
Okay. All right, sir.
First question is from Rudrula. She asks, ma'am, can you explain the protocol of working parallel with the patent pending technology? For example, if we see a product which mentioned that the technology is patent pending, can we work on the design and development of the same?
So yes, that's a very interesting question. So patent pending, if they have mentioned, they've actually staked a claim on that technology, which means that it's sufficient notice for you to be aware of what's happening. So if you still work on it, and if at a later point of time they are able to show that you have infringed on their patent, they may sue you. Now, the interesting thing about this is, if the patent is rejected, then they don't really have any option against you. But if the patent is granted, then they can sue you for infringement which happened even prior to grant of that patent. Okay. So this is a bit of a speculative kind of an activity that you're doing. If they are granted patent, you will be in trouble if you have infringed on their patent, because you had sufficient notice that patent was pending. On the other hand, if a patent is rejected, then it is fine for you to have worked with it, because there is no one to exclude you from doing that.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question from the same person,
Yes.
Mridula. If we have already filed an international patent, PCT application, do we have to file the patent separately for each country, individual country?
Yes, that's also a very good question. Like I had explained, if you file PCT application, you can designate offices where you need patent. And within a period of 30 months, you have the flexibility of patenting that invention in any jurisdiction of your preference within the list of 153 countries. You can patent it anywhere. But when you patent, say, for example, in United States of America, you've already filed for it in India. We've been granted that patent in India. It automatically doesn't mean that USA will grant you a patent. You need to pay the fees in United States of America, which comes to around 10 times our fees. And then that jurisdiction will grant you patent. But the process is easier because you already have a priority date on India. The day on which you file for a patent in India will be the priority date. And no one in USA can use that particular technology or apply for a patent because you already have the priority. Okay. Second is, whichever country you need to obtain patent from under the PCT, your process is simpler because patent examination is already completed and the report is already generated. The only thing that they actually need is the fees and the rest of it. So this is again some. If I don't know if I'm digressing away from it. Certain jurisdictions have problems with certain inventions. Just because India has given you patent or United States has given you patent doesn't mean that Europe will. So European jurisdictions, they may decide as per their specific biotechnology directives that your invention cannot be granted patent. In that case, they can reject it. So there is no certainty that way.
Okay, another question from Radullah. After filing the provisional application, can we split the content and file them as separate applications later?
It's much better to not delay. So if you're talking about the claims within the specification, it's much better to apply it as early as possible, like I mentioned. There are some patent applicants who do the strategy. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Because if the earlier application shows up as prior art, then you will be in trouble because in the first application, if you had taken it along with this, maybe it would have cleared the way. But now, because you've delayed it, you may be rejected at a later point of time. And also, some other people may occupy that position where you already had the invention in your hand, but you did not apply for it. Someone else can apply and then be the first past the post, which is not a good thing.
Okay, another question, ma'am. I hope that you have already answered this question, but still I'm just posing it for the benefit of others. Vishnu Prasad asks how we can generate revenue from a patent. Can you specify any case study?
There are so many case studies.
Yes.
You can think about any specific, like Myriad Genetics is a very good example. CRISPR is another example. Just because Dr. Doudna and Charpentier, they have a patent in India, they have a patent in United States, in China, in every jurisdiction they have a patent. How that works is, suppose you want to use that same technology and you have to license it out from them. You need to pay money to them for licensing the technology. The product itself that they are making, they can make money, export it, they can import it, they can do anything with it. So that is how it works. Especially in telecom industry, you find that patents, they play a huge part.
Okay. Ma'am, the last question is from a participant, Shivaram.
Yeah.
I couldn't really understand his question, so I will just ask him to directly communicate. Shivaram ji, आपका question समझ में नहीं आया? हिंदी में पूछेंगे कि नहीं?
Yes, sir. One question. Protocol and patent are same kind.
He's asking whether protocol and patent are the same or not. Should we understand that the same concept?
Sir, protocol is it? Is it research protocol that you mean, sir?
शिवराम जी, आप जो पूछ रहे हैं रिसर्च प्रोटोकॉल के बारे में पूछ रहे हैं कि नहीं?
जी, yes, ma'am. As regarding research paper, protocol and patent are.
No. So usually when you apply for you're doing biomedical research, you need two kinds of clearances from your institution. You need research clearance and you need ethical clearance. So these two are institutional and they are important when you're going for publication. But patent is quite different. If you come across something for which you feel that you can get a patent, you can file for a patent with institutional support or institutional clearance. That doesn't have anything to do with the institution of which you are a part. You have to go to the patent office and file it. Okay.
Ma'am, the last question for the day.
In this case, protocol exists or not? Protocol means here.
Shivaram?
I think you mean whether patent has a protocol, how the patent is to be filed, whether there is a protocol. If that is what you meant, then yes, if you go to the IT India website, they very clearly tell you there is a schedule with the forms and the fees as well. If you're filing it as an individual, for the number of claims, if it's more than 30, then there's a specific limit. Because you're an individual, you need to pay 1,600 per form 1. And for additional sheets that you submit, you need to pay additional amounts. Like that, fees and the forms are very clearly laid down, and you can follow that if you want to see a protocol for how to file for patent.
Okay, ma'am. The last question for the day.
Yes.
Can more than one individual file a patent together?
Yes, sure, sure. So you can have a patent application which contains a whole lot of patent applicants. You can have an assignment. For instance, you're working in a university. You may be the first inventor, but the person who's filing for it and who will obtain it and who will handle it in future will be the university, or sorry, will be the university or the institution. Because you're an employee, though you are the person who came up with the invention, the terms of your employment contract may be that the university or the institution, it obtains the patent from you. So there may be co-applicants, in the sense there may be a first inventor, there may be a second inventor. Like that, you can have as many number of applicants as you. It can be corporate and it can be individual.
Thank you, ma'am. It is time that we have to wind up this session. It was really informative. It actually opened up a lot of information we actually didn't know from our perspective. Thank you very much for joining us, ma'am. It was really helpful that you joined us and shared light on whatever we wanted to know. Thank you. And some participants are asking whether they can contact you through your email. Is it okay?
Yes, please. Shall I just type it here?
Yeah, you can. I already told them they can visit the website. It's available there, but you can still type it. Okay, thank you.
So I
Thank
have
you.
typed it here. Yes. So it was wonderful being here. I couldn't interact more. This is a problem with online interactions. But I'm very happy to meet you all, and I hope you have benefited in some way. Any question that you want to talk, you want to discuss with me, please write to me at this mail ID, and I'll be happy to help you. Anyway, all the best, and I wish all success to the program. I especially like to thank Dr. Ajit, Mr. Akash, as well as the Rajagiri institution. It's always a pleasure to be at Rajagiri. All right, thank you so much.
Our pleasure, ma'am.
Have a good day, all.
Thank you. So
shall I log out?
Yes,
then?
ma'am. Yes, please. So for the information of the participants, the next talk would be from scientist from Sri Chitra Institute of Science and Technology, Mr. Subhash NN. He's working in the biomedical division of Sri Chitra Medical Science. He'll be detailing about the design protocols involved in biomedical research. So we log out now and rejoin again by 11:45, 11:50 round. Okay.